She boarded like any other passenger, composed, focused, and armed with a first-class ticket. But when Camille Brooks, a black tech CEO, reached seat 2A, a white man was already there, lounging with smug confidence. "You must be in the wrong section," he said. What followed wasn't just a seating dispute. It became a viral reckoning. Within 60 minutes, the plane was grounded, lives were upended, and a secret Garrett McConnell had buried for years was about to detonate in front of cameras and a retired federal judge. If you've ever witnessed quiet power turn a system upside down, this story is for you. The polished floor of the jet bridge echoed softly under Camille's heels as she stepped into the first-class cabin. Her blazer, navy with a gold satin lining, flowed slightly with her stride. Every inch of her appearance was meticulous. The sleek bun at the nape of her neck, the structured leather portfolio in hand, the platinum pin on her lapel engraved with Lumos intelligence. She was used to walking into rooms where she didn't look like anyone else, and commanding them anyway. Today, her flight from Dallas to Seattle wasn't just a business trip. It was the bridge to a $70 million Series B funding deal that could redefine her company's future. Camille reached row 2 and froze. Seat 2A, the one clearly printed on her boarding pass, was already occupied. The man reclined comfortably, leg crossed, scrolling through his phone with a kind of relaxed entitlement that only came from deep familiarity with privilege. Mid-40s, salt and pepper temples, tailored gray suit that whispered money. His bag was shoved under the seat in front of him, and his jacket was already hung up in the cabin closet. Camille checked her boarding pass again, as if her eyes might have deceived her. They hadn't. She cleared her throat gently, her voice firm but polite. "Excuse me, I believe you're in my seat, 2A. The man looked up with the faintest smirk and zero urgency. "You sure?" he asked casually, his eyes sliding over her like she was background noise. "Looks like you might be in the wrong section." The words weren't loud, but they sliced deep, layered with implication. Camille's jaw tightened, but she didn't flinch. "No," she replied evenly, holding out her boarding pass. "This is 2A. That's what my ticket says." The man barely glanced at the document before waving it off. Right. I'm Garrett McConnell. I'm sure the airline sorted something out. Maybe there was an upgrade mix-up. It happens." The name hit like a flicker in Camille's memory. McConnell, Summit Equity, one of the lead VPs for a venture fund that had once ghosted Lumos's early pitch years ago. She'd moved past it, but not forgotten. Garrett leaned back, signaling finality. "Look, we're all just trying to get to Seattle, right? Maybe just take another seat and avoid the drama." Before Camille could respond, a flight attendant approached, young, blonde, with a practiced smile. "Lindsay," her name tag read. "Is there a problem here?" she asked sweetly, eyes darting between them. Camille turned to her, voice calm. "Yes, I'm assigned to 2A. This gentleman is occupying it." Lindsay turned to Garrett with a breezy chuckle. "Mr. McConnell, did you get another upgrade again?" she said, like greeting an old friend. "You're always lucky." Garrett gave a half smile. "Seems like it." Camille interjected, "With respect, my pass clearly states this seat. Could we confirm the manifest?" Lindsay's smile faltered, then reshaped into something more patronizing. "Of course, but we're on a tight departure schedule. Would you mind taking 4C just for now? It's also a window seat." Camille inhaled slowly. The tone, the assumption, the casual dismissal, all so familiar. "No," she said, her voice soft but firm. "I paid for 2A. That's where I'll be sitting." Lindsay's smile thinned into something brittle. "We just want to avoid a delay. It's only a seat." Only a seat. As if that seat hadn't been earned. As if it hadn't symbolized something she'd fought for her entire career. From the corner of her eye, Camille noticed a man across the aisle lower his newspaper. Another woman pulled out her phone discreetly. Eyes were shifting toward them. The air was tight, pressurized, not just from altitude. Garrett leaned forward slightly. "Listen," he said in a lower voice, just for her. You don't want to make a scene. Trust me, it's not worth it. Camille met his eyes. Cold, controlled. And then she said nothing, because she knew the silence would sting more. Lindsay looked back at the boarding area. We really should get everyone seated, she mumbled. I'll speak to the captain if needed. Camille said, Please do. It wasn't the words that shook people. It was the way she stood. Absolutely still, not angry, not aggressive, just unmovable, like granite wrapped in silk. Garrett shifted in his seat, perhaps feeling for the first time that this wasn't going to play out like usual. But still, he smirked. You sure you belong in first class? He asked, voice low but slicing. No offense. Camille's eyebrows rose slightly. I'm certain. The man across the aisle blinked. The woman with the phone hit record. Camille didn't need to say more. Not yet. But the temperature had shifted. The cabin wasn't just uncomfortable. It was electric. This wasn't just about a seat. This was about who gets believed without question, who gets dismissed without hesitation. The pressure built, quietly but steadily. From the flight crew, from the man in the seat, from the systems that had always assumed Camille needed to prove herself twice, 3 times, endlessly. But she wasn't raising her voice. She wasn't flailing. She just stood, calm, resolute, and devastatingly certain. And that certainty? That was the real threat. Camille didn't move. She didn't flinch. As Lindsay disappeared toward the front of the aircraft, presumably to speak to the captain, Camille stood calmly in the aisle, hands folded over her leather portfolio. The quiet tension between her and Garrett was thick enough to hum. The silence was not weakness. It was strategy. Because Camille Brooks had learned, long ago, that sometimes the loudest form of power came from restraint. 5 years ago, in a sleek, glass-walled conference room overlooking the San Francisco Bay, Camille had pitched Lumos Intelligence to Summit Equity. Garrett McConnell had been there. He hadn't spoken much, just observed from the corner, pen tapping rhythmically, eyes scanning the slide deck. Camille had presented with brilliance, adaptive AI algorithms that corrected for racial and gender bias in real-time data processing, a breakthrough in machine learning, years ahead of its time. But afterward, the feedback had come in thinly veiled code. Impressive technology, but we're not sure about market readiness. Your projections are ambitious. Your team lacks senior leadership experience. She was the founder, the architect of the tech, the one who'd built it from scratch while couch surfing between accelerators. Yet somehow, her resume needed more proof. A month later, Summit Equity invested $20 million in a similar company led by a Stanford dropout, white, male, and 2 years younger than Camille. His pitch had included 3 slides and a joke about dating apps. Camille had swallowed the rejection like glass, quietly, gracefully. Then she'd built Lumos into a company 10 times more valuable. Now here he was, Garrett McConnell, lounging in her seat on a commercial flight, still mistaking decorum for deference. On board, the other passengers watched from behind sunglasses, phone screens, and polite curiosity. Camille didn't care for the optics anymore. She cared for the principle, because this wasn't her first seat she'd had to fight for. When Camille was 27, just 2 years out of grad school, she was up for a lead data scientist position at one of the top AI labs in Boston. The interview had gone flawlessly. She'd outperformed every technical challenge, proposed a new model on the fly, and had even predicted, accurately, a flaw in the lab's existing system. Yet days later, the email came. We've decided to go in another direction. A week later, she saw the announcement. A white male hire, less qualified, with no graduate degree, and whose last job was at a digital marketing firm. She had stared at the screen for a long time. Then she'd made a vow, never to ask permission again. And she hadn't. Lumos was her rebellion made tangible, an empire coded in patience and powered by silence. Back in the plane, Garrett's voice cut through the air again, this time laced with mock concern. "You know," he said, "I donate to this airline every year. Executive status, top-tier loyalty member. I practically funded this plane." Camille's expression didn't change. Garrett leaned in slightly, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial murmur. "It's about relationships, sweetheart, not receipts. Maybe you should take notes." There it was, the blend of condescension and ownership that corporate America had perfected. "Who do you think they'll side with?" he added, gesturing vaguely toward the cockpit. "A donor who's flown with them for 15 years, or someone who just bought a ticket online?" Camille's reply was soft. "I think they'll side with whoever's right, or at least they should." "Sure," he scoffed. "Let's pretend this is about right and wrong, not power." Camille let his words hang in the air like smoke. Then she gently reached into her bag and pulled out her boarding pass again. Still 2A. She turned toward the cabin, now aware that multiple phones were filming. "I'm not asking for a favor," she said evenly, her voice just loud enough to carry. "I'm asking for what I paid for." A quiet murmur rippled through the front rows. One man nodded. A woman whispered something to her partner. The temperature was shifting again. Lindsay returned, her smile now stiff. "Ma'am, we're still trying to confirm the manifest. In the meantime, would you consider taking seat 4C just to let us get everyone boarded?" Camille didn't look away. "No, I'll wait for the manifest." Lindsay blinked. "Ma'am, this is going to delay the flight." "That's not on me." Lindsay hesitated. "We're just asking for cooperation." "I'm cooperating," Camille said. "I'm waiting for confirmation, as should everyone when there's a dispute." Garrett made a sound like a laugh. "You're really going to hold up an entire plane over one seat?" "It's not just a seat," Camille replied, still calm. "And you know it." That made him shift, because she wasn't shouting. She wasn't emotional. She wasn't playing the role. She was just standing there, calmly refusing to move, in the same way she'd refused 1,000 quiet slights across her career. The ones in meetings where men repeated her ideas as their own. The ones in conferences where she was mistaken for catering staff. The ones in venture rooms where they asked about her technical co-founder, because surely she couldn't have built it alone. Every time she had smiled. Every time she had remembered. And now she was standing in 2A's aisle, not just for a seat, but for every woman like her who'd been told to move, politely, gently, forcibly. From behind, someone coughed. Another person muttered something about, "Just let her sit." The tide was turning. Camille looked forward toward the cockpit. "When the captain has the manifest," she said clearly, "I'll take whichever seat it assigns me." Her voice never cracked. And in that moment, no one, especially not Garrett, could look away. A low murmur spread through the cabin as a tall figure in a Navy uniform boarded the aircraft from the front. His presence shifted the energy instantly, stern, silent, observant. Officer Tyrone Baker, senior security for Dallas International Airport, stood straight-backed, his badge glinting under the cabin lights. He scanned the scene with a measured eye, assessing without emotion. "Good morning," he said, tone clipped but calm. "What's the situation here?" Before Camille could open her mouth, Garrett was already rising slightly in his seat, hand half raised like a student in a courtroom drama. "Officer," he began with theatrical calm, "I'm so glad you're here. I've been trying to cooperate, but this woman," he gestured toward Camille, "has been escalating things. I don't feel safe." Camille's mouth tightened. The weaponization of that word, safe, was almost routine now. How easily it rolled off his tongue. How strategically chosen. "I don't feel safe," in the hands of a white man against a black woman, wasn't just dishonest. It was an attack, cloaked in faux vulnerability. Tyrone turned to Camille, face unreadable. "Ma'am, is that correct?" "No," Camille said evenly, lifting her boarding pass. "I've said nothing threatening. I simply asked to sit in my assigned seat, 2A. Garrett interrupted. She refused to cooperate with flight staff, delayed the boarding, raised her voice. Lindsay chimed in hesitantly. "Well, not raised. but she's been unyielding. Camille glanced at Lindsay, then back to Officer Baker. I've been firm, not loud, not disruptive, just clear. Officer Baker nodded slowly, then held out his hand. May I see your boarding pass, please? Camille handed it over. Baker studied it carefully. Seat 2A, confirmed. He looked at Garrett. Sir, may I see yours? Garrett nodded, reaching into his jacket pocket and pulling out his phone. He opened the airline app and flashed it quickly, too quickly, for Officer Baker to examine fully. See? I showed it to the flight attendant already, Garrett said. Camille took a step forward. He's deliberately hiding the seat number. He did the same earlier. He hasn't shown anyone clearly where he's assigned. I did, Garrett said indignantly. Ask her. He pointed to Lindsay. The flight attendant's face flushed. He did show me something. I didn't catch the exact number, but... Camille turned back to Officer Baker. You can scan both passes against the manifest. That will clear this up immediately. Garrett leaned back, arms folded. We don't have time for this. We're holding up the entire flight because she's making a scene. That phrase again. Making a scene. Another subtle cue. One that painted Camille as irrational, emotional, disruptive. It didn't matter that she had stood still, calm, measured the entire time. Officer Baker's brow furrowed slightly. Let me speak to the captain. He stepped forward, disappearing into the cockpit, leaving behind a strange vacuum. Garrett exhaled dramatically, loud enough for everyone to hear. Unbelievable. Camille stood tall, unmoving. But inside, she felt the shifting, the tide turning, not toward justice, but toward convenience, toward appeasement. People were starting to fidget in their seats. Murmurs were rising again. She's just dragging it out. Why not just sit somewhere else? It's not that deep. The whispers weren't loud, but Camille could hear every syllable. She was familiar with this moment. The slow erosion of support when you dared insist on something people thought too minor to fight for. Ma'am, Lindsay said gently, we're trying our best. But if you could just... I have made my position clear, Camille replied. This isn't about convenience. It's about truth. Garrett scoffed. Spare me the lecture. One row behind them, an older man leaned over to whisper to his wife. You'd think someone like her would know better than to push it this far. Camille heard it. She heard all of it. The coded implication. Someone like her. This wasn't just a dispute over seating. It had become a referendum on her right to stand firm. Officer Baker reemerged from the cockpit. Captain says the manifest confirms Ms. Brooks is assigned to 2A, he said. Camille breathed, but only slightly. However, Baker continued, to avoid further delays, he suggests we de-escalate by having Ms. Brooks accept another seat for now and sort the rest out post-flight. Garrett grinned. Finally, a little reason. Camille's spine straightened again. So the solution is to reward the person who lied about their seat and punish the person who told the truth? A pause. Baker didn't answer directly. Garrett added, Look, I didn't lie. Maybe there was a mix-up. Tech errors happen all the time. Don't make this about race. No one had said the word yet, race. But it had been in the air since the moment Garrett had looked at Camille and said, You sure you belong here? The discomfort spread like a quiet infection. People wanted peace. Camille knew it. They didn't care about justice. They cared about takeoff. And slowly, painfully, she could feel their gaze shifting, not toward Garrett, but toward her, as if she were the problem now, as if her insistence on being right was an inconvenience. Even the woman with the phone camera had lowered it. The temperature dropped. Camille stood in a storm of polite pressure and invisible bias. She wasn't yelling, wasn't crying, but her stillness now looked suspicious. Her silence, defiant. She could feel the plane tipping, not physically, morally. And for the first time since stepping aboard, a shadow of fatigue slipped behind her eyes. Not defeat, but something dangerously close to resignation. Just as Camille felt the pressure of dozens of gazes inching her toward capitulation, a voice rose, clear, unwavering. and edged with judicial authority. "I believe we've let this go on long enough. All heads turned. From seat 3B, an elegant older woman stood. Her silver hair was swept back in a timeless chignon, and her tailored navy pantsuit seemed to command its own gravity. She clutched a leather satchel in one hand, her bearing more courtroom than cabin. "I'm Judge Helen Monroe," she announced. "Retired from the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, and I've been observing this situation since it began." A hush fell over the cabin. Even Garrett straightened, blinking in recognition. The name carried weight, especially among those familiar with corporate or legal America. Judge Monroe continued, directing her voice toward Officer Baker and the flight crew. "Your manifest, please. Let's settle this matter objectively before bias further clouds basic procedure." Officer Baker hesitated, clearly recalibrating the dynamics in the room. "Yes, ma'am. I'll retrieve the full printed manifest." As he turned toward the cockpit again, the tension in the cabin cracked slightly, like a window finally letting in fresh air. Camille's shoulders relaxed an inch, not because someone had saved her, but because someone with power had finally stood beside her, not behind, not in judgment, but beside. Then, from the 5th row, a second voice joined the moment. "Actually," the young woman said, standing up slowly, "I have something too." She was barely 20, maybe younger. Pink hoodie, earbuds dangling from her neck, phone in hand. Bright green nail polish, a canvas tote bag decorated with protest stickers. "I'm Tina," she said. "I've been filming this whole time. I thought it might come in handy." A ripple moved through the rows. Garrett, now visibly rattled, snapped, "You don't have my consent to record." Tina shrugged. "You're in a public setting, sir. Also, you're not the only one in the video." She turned her phone screen toward Officer Baker, who had just returned with the manifest. "You should probably see this before we talk seating charts." Officer Baker exchanged a glance with Judge Monroe, then accepted the phone. Camille stepped to the side, allowing him room to watch. The video began innocently enough. Passengers boarding, Camille entering the cabin. Then it played the critical moment. Garrett approaching the first-class section, looking around, then stopping at 2A. He reached for a bag already placed on the seat, Camille's designer laptop sleeve, and casually moved it to the overhead bin. He then placed his own bag under the seat and sat down, pulling out his phone as if nothing had happened. Lindsay's voice could be heard off-screen, greeting passengers. The playback ended. Tina looked at Camille. "I saw him move your stuff. That's why I started recording. Felt shady." Camille didn't speak, but the corner of her mouth lifted, just barely. Garrett's face, meanwhile, was blotchy with color. "This is ridiculous. She could have staged that." Tina blinked. "So, now I'm part of some conspiracy?" Judge Monroe stepped in again. "Officer, does the manifest confirm the seat assignments?" Baker cleared his throat, holding the printed document. "Yes, ma'am. Seat 2A is assigned to Camille Brooks. Mr. McConnell is listed in seat 28C, economy section." A collective gasp swept through first class. Camille remained still, calm, centered, but the air around her had shifted. This time, the silence wasn't accusatory. It was anticipatory. Lindsay's face paled. Derek, the other flight attendant, appeared beside her with wide eyes. Garrett let out a bitter laugh. "Fine. So there was a glitch. Big deal." Judge Monroe's gaze sharpened. "A glitch doesn't explain why you moved someone else's belongings and lied to the crew." Lindsay opened her mouth to speak, but closed it again. Her face showed the unmistakable realization of having backed the wrong narrative. Camille turned toward Officer Baker. "May I have my seat now?" Baker nodded. "Yes, ma'am." As Garrett stood reluctantly, muttering under his breath, a smattering of murmurs broke out across the cabin. She was right the whole time. Unbelievable. I feel terrible now. But Camille didn't gloat. She didn't turn to the cameras or seek applause. She simply moved to seat 2A and sat down, folding her hands in her lap. Justice had finally crept into the room, not storming in, but arriving in whispers and video proof. As passengers settled, Tina remained standing for a moment longer. "I'm sending this video to 3 journalists I know," she said. "They'll want to see how these things really go down." Camille raised an eyebrow. "You know reporters?" Tina smiled. "My mom's one of them. Jessica Keene. She's with The Intercept." Camille blinked in recognition. Jessica Keene had broken major exposés on police misconduct, corporate fraud, and tech industry bias. Her investigative work had reshaped policies and toppled CEOs. Tina shrugged. "I kinda grew up with a camera in my hand." That was the twist Camille hadn't seen coming. This wasn't just a helpful stranger. This was a legacy witness, someone trained to see injustice early and with the tools to make it public. "Thank you," Camille said quietly. Tina gave a nod. "I'll be in row 5. Let me know if he tries anything else." As Tina returned to her seat, Garrett lingered in the aisle, now the one being watched. His shoulders hunched. The same eyes that had judged Camille now scrutinized him, unblinking. It wasn't justice, not yet, but it was the first crack in the wall. And for the first time since the boarding debacle began, Camille leaned back against her seat and allowed herself a breath. Not relief, but readiness, because the fight was just beginning. Officer Baker handed Tina's phone back with a measured nod, but there was something in his eyes, hesitation, like the scales hadn't fully tipped yet. "This video helps," he said, "but I'll need to confirm its legality with airport security. Passenger recordings can get complicated with privacy policies, especially when minors or off-duty staff are involved." Camille's brows tightened. "You just watched a man move my belongings and lie about his seat. What more is there to verify?" Baker didn't flinch. "Ma'am, I'm not disputing the situation. I'm just saying, per protocol, we can't use that video to make an enforcement decision without clearance. The manifest will stand for now, but anything beyond that, disciplinary actions, reports, has to go through legal." The air cooled again. Camille could feel it. The pendulum, having swung slightly in her favor, beginning to drift back toward neutrality, toward bureaucracy, toward that infuriating gray area where truth gets filed away under pending review. She glanced toward Garrett, now seated in 4C with a faux wounded look plastered across his face. His arms were crossed tightly, but his lips curled into something close to satisfaction. "See what I mean?" he said loudly enough for half the cabin to hear. "This is what happens when you succeed. People come after you." A few heads turned toward him, some blank, some sympathetic, most just tired of the ordeal. "I didn't lie," Garrett continued, as if on cue. "I didn't steal anything. I assumed there was a mix-up, and now I'm being painted like a criminal? What, for being a successful investor who happens to be white?" Camille didn't respond. She didn't need to. The silence between them now was like glass, cracking, fragile, ready to shatter. But the weight of delay pressed heavily against her. The longer this dragged on, the more likely the real loss would unfold. Not in this cabin, but 1,700 miles away in a Seattle boardroom. She reached for her phone, thumbed open her messaging app, and typed, "Kayla, connect me to investors, now." A minute passed, then 2. Then her phone vibrated. She accepted the call, then rose slowly, turning toward the front of the cabin. "Excuse me," she said to Officer Baker. "I'd like to take a business call briefly. It concerns this situation." He nodded once. "Keep your voice low." Camille tapped the screen. A conference room lit up. At the center sat Lawrence Patterson, stern-faced lead partner at Pinnacle Horizons. Flanking him were 2 other investment committee members and 1 executive Camille didn't immediately recognize. Her heart rate ticked up, not from nerves, but urgency. "Ms. Brooks," Lawrence said with clipped formality, "we were informed you've encountered complications." "Yes, sir," Camille replied, voice clear but tight. "I've been prevented from taking my assigned seat due to an ongoing dispute. There's video evidence supporting my claim, but security is delaying action." She continued, summarizing the timeline. Calm, precise, not a hint of desperation, even as the minutes bled away. "I called because I don't want you misinterpreting my delay as a lack of professionalism," she concluded. "It's the result of blatant obstruction and misconduct." There was a pause. Then a voice from the right side of the table spoke. It was a woman, maybe early 50s, with piercing eyes and a tone dipped in measured skepticism. "And you're sure this has nothing to do with emotional escalation?" she asked. "We've had founders lose deals over less." Camille recognized her. Victoria Hale, partner at Pinnacle, and the woman who, 5 years ago, had sat across from Camille during Lumos's seed round pitch and said with a polite smile, "You're impressive, but we're looking for a founder with more gravitas." Gravitas. That coded word that could mean anything and everything. Too young, too black, too female. Now here she was again. Camille met the screen with quiet fire. "No, Ms. Hale, I haven't raised my voice once. I haven't disobeyed any orders. I've been denied my rightful seat and filmed while doing nothing but standing my ground." "Video footage isn't always the full picture," Victoria said calmly. "And there's a fine line between resilience and being difficult." The dig wasn't subtle. Camille's pulse surged, but her face remained a mask of composure. "I agree," she said. "And I trust that as investors evaluating AI leadership, you can tell the difference between someone demanding truth and someone causing chaos." Lawrence interrupted. "Where are you now, Ms. Brooks?" "Still in the cabin," Camille said. "They're reviewing a manifest, but it may take longer. I've offered to share the video with your team directly." "That won't be necessary," Lawrence said. "We'll hold the meeting as scheduled. If you arrive before 2:30, we'll proceed. If not, we have a secondary pitch from Apex Tech at 3 o'clock. Camille nodded. "Understood." She ended the call. No pleasantries, no begging. As she turned off the screen, she felt the weight of every boardroom, every interview, every moment she'd had to prove herself stacked on her shoulders like bricks. She returned to her seat. Lindsay avoided eye contact. Garrett was smirking again as if to say, "You're fighting the tide, sweetheart." But Camille didn't look at him. She looked straight ahead, unmoving, unshaken. Because even though the system was trying to swallow the truth again, she knew this time, someone was watching. Just as the air threatened to go flat again, tension pressed down by bureaucracy, by the slow bleed of justice into procedure, another voice pierced the cabin. "Wait, is that Camille Brooks?" Heads turned again. From seat 2D, diagonally across from where Camille still sat like a pillar in purgatory, a man leaned forward. Latino, mid-40s, dressed in business casual, his laptop open on his tray. His voice was cautious at first, as if confirming a memory. Camille turned her head, eyes narrowing slightly. "Yes?" The man's expression brightened. "Luis Alvarez, CTO at Sentinel Networks. You keynoted at the Global AI Integrity Summit last year. Your AI architecture caught a breach in our system before it hit our clients." Several people looked at him now, blinking at the sudden shift in tone. Camille simply gave a small nod. Luis turned toward the crew. "Gentlemen, ladies, do you even understand who you're pushing to the side here?" Lindsay stammered. We're trying to resolve. This woman's company developed adaptive intrusion response algorithms that shut down and exploit targeting government servers. Our servers, he emphasized. If Lumos hadn't flagged it, we'd have lost millions, and that's just the financial side. He turned toward Officer Baker now. "So before you let some donor-tier investor rewrite this narrative, maybe take a moment to figure out who you're actually dealing with." Officer Baker blinked. "Sir, I appreciate that, but the issue is under control." "It's not under control," Luis said, not raising his voice, but filling the space with authority. "It's barely being handled." Garrett let out a sardonic chuckle. "Wow, what's next? A testimonial? Should we roll out a red carpet?" Luis didn't look at him. "I work in tech security. I've met enough narcissists with PR armor to know the type." Garrett's smirk faltered. Luis continued, this time turning to the cabin. "Camille Brooks is one of the sharpest minds working in machine learning today. She's been featured in MIT Tech Review, Wired, and Forbes. If this were a conference instead of a plane, half of you would be elbowing your way to ask her a question. A few heads dipped awkwardly. Camille remained still, but her spine lifted a little higher. Officer Baker cleared his throat. "We do have confirmation from the manifest that Ms. Brooks is assigned to 2A. We've already asked Mr. McConnell to relocate." Luis arched a brow. "Then why is this still happening?" Garrett stood now, his voice taking on a defensive tone, slightly breathless. "Because I didn't try to deceive anyone. Maybe there was a change. Maybe someone messed up the booking. I didn't force anyone. I just sat down." "After removing someone else's personal item?" Tina called from row 5. "And implying I didn't belong," Camille added for the first time in minutes, her voice low but steel-edged. Garrett turned to Officer Baker. "This is getting out of hand. Now I'm being ganged up on because I'm the white guy in a suit?" Lindsay shifted uncomfortably. "No one's saying that, sir." "I'm saying it," Garrett snapped, finally losing his grip on the mask. "This is reverse discrimination. It's character assassination." Judge Monroe, still seated calmly at 3B, looked up from her tablet. "Funny, I thought character was best measured by behavior." Camille didn't smile, but the corner of her mouth curved slightly. Lindsay leaned toward Officer Baker, whispering something. He nodded and addressed Camille. "Ms. Brooks, if you'd like, we can offer to log an official complaint and document the incident fully post-flight." Camille shook her head. "That's not enough. What would you prefer, ma'am?" She didn't answer directly. Instead, she pulled out her phone and tapped into the camera app. She held it up, not quite to film others, but to speak. "Timestamp, 8:42 a.m., she said. "I'm recording this for my own protection and record." There was a quiet click as she began the video. "My name is Camille Brooks, CEO of Lumos Intelligence. I've been delayed from accessing my assigned seat, despite clear manifest proof, due to another passenger's refusal to move and the crew's failure to act immediately." She paused. Garrett shifted behind her, clearly realizing this was going wider. She continued, "I'm missing an investor meeting that represents $70 million in funding. Every minute of delay jeopardizes years of work, not just for me, but for my staff, our partners, and the innovations we've built to protect entire digital infrastructures." Her tone was cool, controlled, piercing. "So, to the airline watching this later," she added, locking eyes with Lindsay briefly, "every minute of this inaction is not just costing me. It's burning your future with mine." She ended the video, saved it, and immediately uploaded it to the Lumos internal server, tagging her assistant Kayla. "Send to press only if I say so," she texted. Then she put the phone down and stared ahead, back rigid, calm as an ice blade. Behind her, Garrett muttered something under his breath. Camille didn't respond, but Tina did. "I heard that," Tina said flatly. "I'm still filming, and I've got better audio than you think." Garrett paled. Then Luis added one final blow. "By the way," he said, his voice deceptively light, "doesn't Summit Equity have an open discrimination case right now? Or did that go away after a settlement?" Camille turned slightly, brow arched. "What are you talking about?" she asked. Luis shrugged. "One of our interns used to be a paralegal at Branton & Ellis. Said Summit buried a harassment case against one of their VPs a year ago. It never made it to court, but the NDA settlement was expensive." Garrett's face went completely white. Judge Monroe looked up again. "What was the name of the VP?" Luis pretended to think. "I think it started with a G." He looked right at Garrett. Garrett exploded. "This is slander. You don't know what you're talking about." "No," Luis said, "but she might." He gestured to Camille. Camille turned fully now, facing Garrett head-on. "Is that true?" she asked. Garrett said nothing, and in his silence, there was all the confirmation anyone needed. By the time Camille's phone buzzed again, her seat still wasn't fully hers. Garrett had been displaced from 2A physically, yes, but emotionally, the space was still suspended in tension. He now loitered near 4C with the false calm of someone waiting to speak to a manager. Lindsay and Derek flitted around the first-class cabin like bees in a hive on fire, and Officer Baker remained stationed by the galley, arms crossed, radio crackling faintly. Camille looked down at the notification on her phone. It was a direct call request from an unlisted number, routed through the airline's internal communication system. The name attached, Andrea Montgomery. Camille blinked. Andrea Montgomery? The CEO of the entire airline? She tapped to accept. Her voice was low, precise. Camille Brooks speaking. A pause. Then a familiar tone answered, cool and clipped, but unmistakably composed. Ms. Brooks, this is Andrea Montgomery. I've been fully briefed on the situation aboard Flight 572. I'd like to speak with you privately, if possible. Camille's eyes flicked to Officer Baker. There's not much privacy on a plane. I'm aware, Andrea replied, but I've secured the crew's office channel. I'll patch you in. This won't be monitored or recorded. The line clicked over, and Camille moved her phone to her lap, screen turned down. Andrea continued. Let me begin by acknowledging the obvious. This was mishandled. You had every right to your seat. You had every right to stand your ground, and it should never have escalated this far. Camille was silent. Andrea added more quietly now. I'm not just saying that as an executive. I'm saying that as someone who remembers exactly who you are. That gave Camille pause. Excuse me? 10 years ago, Andrea said, and there was the faintest edge in her voice now. We competed in the InnovateX Tech Pitch Finals in Chicago. You pitched Lumos's earliest prototype, bias mitigation for institutional data sorting. I pitched SmartPath, automated logistics for airline inventory systems. The memory surged forward like a ripple across still water. A wood-paneled ballroom, nervous applause, and a face Camille hadn't registered since. A tight smile behind eyes that didn't blink during competition. You came in second, Camille said evenly. I did. There was no hesitation, no denial. Camille leaned back. So, that's why you're calling me directly? No, Andrea said. I'm calling you directly because I've been watching the video circulating on social media for the last 20 minutes. Hashtag Camille was right is trending on 3 platforms, and every major news outlet already has a copy. Camille hadn't checked, but Tina clearly had acted. Andrea continued. You are not only a passenger, you're a public figure now, whether you wanted it or not. And I need to handle this correctly, which means first, getting you your seat, and second, ensuring your voice is heard. Camille let the silence stretch for a beat. Is that an apology, Ms. Montgomery? It's an overture, Andrea replied. An invitation to fix what was broken and to speak directly, woman to woman, leader to leader. Camille considered her words carefully. And what does that fix look like? I'd like to meet with you privately, Andrea said. In Seattle. I can arrange ground transportation, expedited exit, and a formal apology on record. But I'd prefer to have the conversation face to face. Camille's tone sharpened slightly. Because I earned my seat, or because your PR team's hair is on fire? Andrea didn't flinch. Both. Camille appreciated the honesty, though she didn't reward it. Not yet. She glanced toward the aisle. Garrett was speaking to Officer Baker again, gesturing angrily now. The heat on his face was unmistakable. Tina was still recording, camera discreet but steady. Luis looked ready to pounce if Garrett so much as raised his voice again. I'll agree to the meeting, Camille said finally. But this doesn't absolve what happened. Your crew failed me today. I know, Andrea replied, and I intend to address it, not just with you, but with our entire leadership structure. The call ended with no formal goodbye. Camille placed her phone down and finally, leaned back in seat 2A, not because it was comfortable now, but because she had reclaimed it on her terms. But Garrett wasn't done. He turned, facing her from across the aisle. His voice was louder now, meant to be heard. I hope you're proud of yourself, weaponizing social media to get attention, playing the race card in first class. Camille said nothing. Luis stood now, voice sharp. You need to sit down." Garrett pointed at Camille. "This isn't justice. This is manipulation. The only reason anyone listens to you now is because you're making noise. You didn't earn that seat." Camille finally looked up. "No," she said. "I earned this seat 10 years ago when I stayed up 3 nights debugging code while you were at cocktail hour. I earned it when I took my company from 0 to 100 employees without a single lawsuit. And I earned it when I walked on this plane with a ticket that said 2A. Garrett opened his mouth, but Judge Monroe stood first. "Mr. McConnell," she said crisply, "if you don't return to your assigned seat immediately, I will file an official complaint as a federal witness to misconduct and interference with flight operation." Garrett stared at her. Then he sat. Officer Baker gave Camille a small nod of acknowledgement, silent, but it meant something. Camille exhaled, the first full breath since boarding, and above her, somewhere in the clouded digital sky, the Camille was right continued to climb. The hum of the cabin had just begun to settle when the intercom crackled again. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Due to an unresolved security concern, one passenger will be deplaned prior to takeoff. We appreciate your patience." All heads turned, some already anticipating the obvious. Garrett stood reluctantly, red-faced and brimming with indignation. Officer Baker flanked him as he moved slowly down the aisle, muttering under his breath. "This is all your fault," he said to Camille as he passed. "Hope that viral fame is worth your business." Camille didn't answer. She simply watched him go, jaw set, expression unreadable. There was a flicker of satisfaction in the air, a vindication. The man who had hijacked her seat, her dignity, and almost her future, was now being escorted off the aircraft in front of every camera lens and set of judging eyes. But the relief was short-lived, because Officer Baker didn't leave the plane. He turned around and looked directly at Camille. "Ms. Brooks," he said, clearing his throat. "Captain Warren would like to speak with you in the jetway for a moment. Please bring your belongings." A stunned silence fell. Camille blinked. "Excuse me?" "It's standard procedure when there's a high-profile disturbance," he added quickly. "Just a few questions for the incident report." Lindsay avoided eye contact. Tina stood up, holding her phone, clearly sensing something wasn't right. "I've already given my statement," Camille said slowly, voice tight with warning. "I understand," Baker said, more softly now. "But the captain insists. It's protocol." "Protocol for the person who didn't break the rules?" A beat passed. And then Camille stood. She gathered her bag, her coat, and her composure. Before stepping off the plane, she turned to Judge Monroe. "If I'm not back in 5 minutes, I'd appreciate you making a statement to the press." The judge's smile was faint, but razor sharp. "I already drafted it in my head." The jetway was colder than the cabin. Emotionally, if not literally. 2 airline staff stood at the entrance to the plane, alongside a supervisor with a clipboard and a thin, insincere smile. "Ms. Brooks," the supervisor began, "we appreciate your cooperation. We just want to ensure all facts are clearly documented before departure." Camille narrowed her eyes. "The manifest confirmed my seat. You've seen the video. The witnesses are credible. What else is unclear?" The supervisor hesitated, glancing down at his clipboard as if it might save him. "There are concerns that the public nature of the incident may disrupt the flight experience for other passengers. In the interest of safety and timeliness, the decision has been made to continue the flight without further disruption." Camille froze. "What are you saying?" He looked up, eyes soft with fake regret. "You won't be reboarding this flight." It landed like a slap. "You're bumping me off the flight? After everything?" "We'll provide full rebooking assistance, priority status, and—" "No," Camille cut in, voice sharp now. "You're removing the victim of harassment and letting the delay be blamed on me?" The man didn't respond, but the door behind her hissed closed. She turned instinctively, but it was too late. The aircraft's cabin door sealed with a hydraulic finality that nearly made her knees buckle. A few seconds later, through the window to her left, she watched as the plane began to taxi away. Without her, without the meeting she was supposed to lead, without the funding she'd built 5 years of work to secure, she stood there in a silent corridor, trying not to scream. Her phone buzzed. "Orange. Patterson. Pinnacle Horizons," she answered. "Ms. Brooks," Lauren said briskly, "we were just informed you're not en route. Is that correct?" "Yes," Camille said, voice low but iron hot. "I was forcibly removed from the flight, despite being confirmed in the right." A pause. "We can't hold the meeting indefinitely," he said. "We have other commitments. If we don't see you in the next 2 hours, we'll proceed with Apex." Camille closed her eyes, fighting the rage clawing its way up her throat. "I'll find a way." She hung up before she could say something she'd regret. Tina came sprinting down the jet bridge seconds later, breathless. "They're trending you again," she said. "People saw you get pulled. They're furious. They're asking why you were the one who got left behind." Camille forced a bitter laugh. "Because the system doesn't care who's right. It cares who's easiest to eject." She slumped against the wall, phone still clutched in her hand. The humiliation was sharp, but the betrayal was worse. She had played every note perfectly, with dignity, with clarity, with patience. And still, she'd been left standing. Forgotten, discarded. "Not forgotten," Tina said, almost reading her mind. "People are watching. This isn't over." Camille looked out the window once more, not with defeat, but with a quiet, rising burn in her chest. It was no longer just about a seat. It was about everything it represented, and everything it had cost her. Camille sat alone in the sterile silence of the terminal's holding area, a patch of sunlight crawling across the floor beside her as the minutes ticked past. Her suitcase rested quietly at her feet, but inside, she felt anything but still. Every cell in her body buzzed with the injustice of it all. She could still see the plane taxiing away without her, the seat she had fought for soaring off into the clouds with her future strapped in beneath the tray table. Her phone buzzed. Andrea Montgomery again. Camille exhaled once, then answered. "Ms. Brooks," Andrea said immediately. No pleasantries this time. "I just received confirmation that you were not allowed to reboard Flight 572. I had been assured otherwise by my team." "Your team lied," Camille said evenly. There was a pause on the line, a shift. "You're right," Andrea replied. "And for that, I owe you a direct apology. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Our staff made cowardly decisions to avoid optics. They prioritized appearances over principle. That's not acceptable." Camille didn't soften. "I lost my flight. I'm losing my meeting. And all I got in return was standard protocol." "You're getting more than that," Andrea said firmly. "I've arranged a private charter flight, direct to Seattle. No delays, no check-ins, no red tape. You'll leave within the hour." Camille blinked. "A private jet?" "Lumos Intelligence isn't the only company watching this unfold," Andrea said. "So is the FAA and the press. I have one shot to handle this the right way, and frankly, I'd rather handle it with you than against you." Camille sat quietly for a beat. Then she said, "I'll take the flight." "Good," Andrea replied. "There's a private room waiting in the VIP lounge. I've instructed the team to give you everything you need." Camille stood, not thanking her, not forgiving her, but acknowledging that, for now, they were aligned. The lounge was quiet, polished, and filled with warm lighting and soft furniture. Camille barely had time to sit before Judge Monroe entered through the side door, followed by Tina and Luis. "You didn't think we'd let you go through this alone, did you?" the judge said with a wry smile. Tina flopped down on the couch, her phone already buzzing with messages. "Social's gone nuclear. Half the internet is asking why a black woman got kicked off a plane she'd paid for and defended herself with facts." Luis poured Camille a cup of hot tea from the lounge bar. "The other half is calling for boycotts of the airline. And wait until you see what's coming out about Garrett." Camille lifted an eyebrow. "What now?" Luis handed her his phone. An article was already live on Tech Pulse. Investor Garrett McConnell accused in past workplace misconduct allegations. Sources claim multiple NDAs signed by female employees. The journalist who posted this used to date someone from Summit Equity's HR department, Luis explained. Apparently, Garrett's been a problem for years. The only reason it never made waves before is because most of the women took settlements. Tina added, and now every woman who ever worked with him is, quote, tweeting with thinly veiled references, like, glad someone finally said it, or, not surprised, just sad it took this long. Camille let the weight of it wash over her. It wasn't just her story anymore. It had triggered something wider, deeper, like pulling a thread that unraveled a whole corporate tapestry. Judge Monroe leaned forward. If you choose to pursue legal action, I'll testify. So will Luis. So will Tina. And I imagine the internet will keep receipts. Camille nodded slowly. I haven't decided yet. That's fair, the judge said. But know this. There are moments in history when the right story at the right time from the right voice shifts more than just the outcome. It shifts culture. Camille looked up. You think this is one of those moments? I think you are, the judge replied. A soft knock at the door interrupted them. A young concierge entered with a headset on and clipboard in hand. Ms. Brooks, your charter flight is fueled and ready. We'll escort you to the tarmac now. Camille stood, slipping her coat over her shoulders. She turned to Tina and Luis. Want to come? Tina grinned. Try stopping me. Luis nodded. Let's go fix your meeting. The private jet was sleek, quiet, and faster than any commercial aircraft Camille had ever flown on. For the first time in hours, she was not under a microscope. No phones recording, no muttered commentary. Just focus. As they climbed through the clouds, Camille opened her laptop and reviewed the updated pitch deck. Tina napped across from her, headphones on. Luis typed rapidly on his own device, pulling updated social media stats and clipping favorable media coverage. Camille's phone buzzed again. A message from Kayla. Investor room is quiet. Apex hasn't pitched yet. You still have a window. Just get here. Camille replied, ETA 90 mins. Keep them warm. Then another message popped up, this one from an unfamiliar number. The message read, Ms. Brooks, I'm an assistant producer at CNN. We'd like to speak with you about your experience today. Millions are watching. You've become the face of something much bigger. Camille closed the app without replying. Not yet. This wasn't about headlines. This was about reclaiming power. And for the first time all day, she felt like she was holding the pen again. She looked out the window, blue skies stretching in every direction. Somewhere far below, Garrett was surely drowning in a PR nightmare. And somewhere ahead, a boardroom was still waiting. This flight wouldn't just deliver her to a meeting. It was delivering her to war, and this time, she had the armor and the army. 30 minutes into the flight, with Seattle still a stretch of sky away, Camille opened her laptop again to rehearse her pitch one last time. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard, but her thoughts kept drifting. Back to the terminal, the plane, the silence that followed the door hissing shut in her face. Her phone pinged. A new email. Subject, investor concern, media behavior. The body was short, cold, vague. Multiple members of our investment committee have expressed concern over a public report indicating Ms. Brooks was removed from a flight due to disruptive behavior. We're reviewing what this means in terms of brand alignment and risk. Attached was a screenshot from a private investor's Slack channel. The message read, "Not sure we should move forward with someone who causes public scenes. She was removed from the plane, right? I've seen those types of activism stunts spiral fast." No signature, no context. But Camille didn't need one. Someone was feeding false information directly to the investor circle, framing her as a liability, a loose cannon. And they were doing it while she was still thousands of feet in the air, fighting to save her shot at funding. She clenched her jaw, inhaled once, then turned her laptop toward Tina. "Start the hotspot." Tina blinked. "You're going live?" "Yes." Luis looked up from his tablet. "You sure?" Camille didn't answer. She adjusted the camera angle on her phone, angled the window behind her as a soft background, and pressed Go Live. The stream lit up instantly. The title read, "What Really Happened on Flight 572." "Good afternoon," Camille began, voice steady, eyes locked on the lens. "My name is Camille Brooks. I'm the founder and CEO of Lumos Intelligence. Some of you may have seen my name in connection with a trending incident involving an airline and an investor." She paused, letting the weight of her presence fill the screen. "I want to take a few minutes to tell you exactly what happened. Not through edited clips, not through rumors, through facts." She laid it all out, boarding the flight, finding Garrett McConnell in her seat, being asked repeatedly to step aside, the video evidence, the manifest confirmation. She described the final insult, being removed from the plane after winning the argument. Tina clipped in real time, adding visuals to the stream from her phone archive. The footage of Garrett moving her bag, the recording of her calmly asserting her rights. The moment Judge Monroe stood up, the sound of the aircraft door closing. Camille continued, "This wasn't about a seat. It was about how quickly truth gets buried when the wrong person tells it." Thousands of viewers flooded the chat. Then tens of thousands. The stream exploded across platforms. By the time she ended the broadcast 22 minutes later, it had been viewed live by over 400,000 people. Within 15 more minutes, CNN reached out. Tina read the message aloud from her tablet. "They want you for the morning segment. Anderson Cooper's producer is also asking for a one-on-one." Luis added, "NBC, BBC, and Vox just emailed too, and the hashtag just passed 5 million mentions." Camille leaned back in her seat. Then her phone buzzed again. A direct message this time, from Andrea Montgomery. "Just saw the live. We'll be issuing a formal statement shortly. Please know I'm making this right." Moments later, a press release hit all major outlets. Breaking. Airline CEO Andrea Montgomery acknowledges full responsibility for mishandling incident involving Camille Brooks. Flight crew decision inconsistent with company values. Internal review underway. Camille read the statement carefully. No legal hedging, no vague language, just clarity. Then Luis tilted his screen toward her, face suddenly grim. "I think we just found your mole." On his display was a leaked email chain from a Summit Equity internal contact. The sender, Corey Fields, executive assistant to Garrett McConnell. The email, forwarded anonymously, contained phrases like, "Investor group may want to distance from the Brooks woman before it becomes a PR liability." Narrative suggestion, emphasize disruption, not discrimination. Investors respond better to instability risk than race accusations. Tina's eyes widened. "That's Garrett's guy." Luis nodded. "And guess where Corey interned before joining Summit? Pinnacle Horizons. They never scrubbed his access to the investor back channel Slack. He still had red permissions." Camille exhaled through her nose, slow and steady. "They're trying to bury me twice," she said. "First with lies, then with silence." Luis sat forward. "What do you want to do?" Camille thought for a long moment. Then she looked straight at the camera on Tina's phone, still propped open from the stream. "We're not done." She wasn't angry now. She was sharp, precise, in control. And if anyone thought this was where the story ended, tens of thousands of feet above the ground, seatless, silenced, they were about to learn exactly what it looked like when a woman like Camille didn't just survive the storm. She broadcasted from its eye. Camille stepped out of the sleek black car onto the polished concrete of Pinnacle Horizons' private parking terrace, her heels clicking with quiet finality. The charter flight had touched down barely 20 minutes earlier, and every second had been a sprint, through security, into transport, into herself. Now she stood at the entrance of a gleaming glass tower, Seattle's skyline spread behind her like a stage curtain waiting to be drawn. Luis and Tina flanked her, both clutching portfolios filled with press clippings, social media analytics, and the live feed transcript. Camille didn't need any of it, because she wasn't here to defend herself. She was here to be heard. The receptionist waved them through without question. Everyone in the building knew who she was now. At the top floor, double glass doors opened into a boardroom she'd only seen through investor decks and virtual meetings. It was larger than she expected, wrapped in floor-to-ceiling windows, with a view of the Puget Sound glimmering in late morning light. Inside, 8 people waited around an oval table, 6 core investment partners and 2 guests. Lawrence Patterson stood first. "Ms. Brooks, thank you for still making the effort." Camille nodded once. "Effort is nothing new to me." No one smiled. She took her place at the front of the room, alone at the head of the table. No presentation deck, no slideshow, no pitch, just her. "I don't have a visual aid today," she began. "I don't have a deck because the last 24 hours have made it very clear your decision won't be based on projections." Silence. Camille looked each member in the eye. "I'm not here to ask for money," she continued. "I'm here to ask whether you understand what side of the future you want to stand on." Someone at the far end shifted uncomfortably. "When I was denied my seat, it wasn't just a logistical mistake. It was the same message black women have heard for centuries. Not yet. Not here. Not like that." She paused, then delivered the blow. "And some of you echoed that message." Lawrence's brow furrowed, but he said nothing. "I don't need another round of cautious support," Camille said. "I need partners who recognize what happened as a symptom of everything we claim our technologies are designed to solve." She drew a slow breath, steady as stone. "If you think I'm too loud, too visible, too controversial, then Lumos isn't for you. But if you think what happened was wrong and that what I've built matters, then you know exactly what to do." Silence. Then Lawrence nodded. "You've made your point." A woman on the left, elegant, mid-50s, cool gaze, lifted a tablet. "We've been reviewing the data from your live stream. Your company's brand engagement jumped 900% overnight. Investors are watching, regulators are watching. You've become more than just a CEO." Camille met her eyes. Something flickered there. Recognition? The woman spoke again. "We're prepared to increase our offer, $90 million for a 15% stake, and a standing seat for you on our strategic advisory board." Camille blinked, but didn't flinch. Then the woman added quietly, "I'm also prepared to step back, if you'd prefer not to have personal entanglements in the room." That caught Camille off guard. Excuse me?" The woman looked directly at her. "My name is Meredith Langley. I joined the board last year under a partnership agreement with Coreline Capital." Camille froze. Langley. Her mother's last name before she'd vanished. "I know this is not the time or place for personal revelations," Meredith said softly. "But yes, I'm your mother, and I've followed your work for years, from afar, quietly." The room went dead quiet. No one moved. No one breathed. Camille's fingers gripped the edge of the table. "You left when I was 4, she said, her voice not shaking, but steel cold. "No calls, no visits, just gone." Meredith nodded. "And I won't ask forgiveness, only acknowledgement. I didn't come here to reclaim anything, but when I saw your name on the docket for investment, I stayed. I wanted to witness who you became, and now that I have, I'll leave that decision to you." Tears didn't come. Camille was past tears, but her heart thudded, uneven and raw, against her ribs. And still, she spoke like a leader. "I don't know if I can forgive you. Not now." Meredith nodded again. "But," Camille added, "I didn't build Lumos on rage. I built it on resilience. So, if this board believes in my work, in my mission, in what this company can do, I'll stay." She turned to Lawrence. "I'll take your offer." And then, to Meredith, "But you're not on the advisory board, not yet. You'll earn that seat like I had to, by showing up." Meredith's lips parted slightly. Then she nodded once. No tears, no grand gestures, just the start of something, possibly. Camille stood as the meeting concluded, the room buzzing with quiet tension and newly found clarity. Luis and Tina met her at the elevator. Luis whispered, "What happened in there?" Camille stared straight ahead. "I kept my seat." And for the first time in her life, she felt like it couldn't be taken again. The stage was massive, backlit with shifting gradients of blue and silver, flanked by towering LED panels that displayed the words World AI Integrity Summit in crisp white font. The room itself pulsed with anticipation. Journalists, CEOs, engineers, and researchers filled every seat, their eyes fixed on the main podium. Camille Brooks stepped into the spotlight. 6 months had passed since Flight 572. 6 months since a seat had become a symbol, a voice had become a movement, and a woman had become a reckoning. Now she stood here not as the center of a scandal, but as the architect of a future no one could deny. "Good afternoon," Camille began, her voice firm but warm, echoing across the hall. "It's an honor to stand before you, not just as a CEO, but as a builder of something far bigger than code." A low murmur of applause rolled through the crowd. She gestured to the backdrop behind her, where live visuals displayed Lumos Intelligence's latest milestones: a 92% increase in ethical deployment partnerships, new contracts with 3 national governments, and a 5-fold expansion in diverse hiring practices across AI sectors. "In the past year," she continued, "we've seen that bias in artificial intelligence doesn't just replicate inequality, it institutionalizes it. And yet, technology can be taught to do better, if the people behind it demand better." She paused, letting that land. "And that's why today, I'm proud to announce the launch of the Brooks Foundation, a full scholarship program dedicated to supporting women of color pursuing careers in AI. The audience erupted. Camille smiled, but not with pride, with something deeper: fulfillment. "We're starting with 20 students this year," she added. "And by 2030, we aim to fund over 500. These women won't just enter the room, they'll reshape the algorithms that run it." Flashbulbs popped. Cameras clicked. Somewhere near the front row, Tina gave her a discreet thumbs up, now serving as Lumos's Director of Media Strategy. Luis, beside her, beamed. He'd joined Lumos full-time last month as Head of Partnerships. And then, the host of the event returned to the stage, microphone in hand. "Ladies and gentlemen, to close this segment, we are proud to present this year's Ethical Innovation Award to a leader who exemplifies the marriage of technology, justice, and vision." The lights dimmed. "And to present the award, please welcome the CEO of Eris Airlines, Ms. Andrea Montgomery." Camille blinked. The crowd murmured. Andrea stepped onto the stage in a sleek charcoal suit, her posture graceful, her expression composed. There were no teleprompters now, just 2 women on a stage, past, present, and future, converging in one room. Andrea approached the podium with measured steps. Her voice, when she spoke, was steady. "6 months ago, my company failed a passenger," she began. "Not because of policy, but because of silence. Because we didn't listen soon enough, didn't act fast enough, and because of that, a woman who had every right to her seat was forced to stand." She turned to Camille. "But she didn't just stand. She spoke. She led. She turned injustice into infrastructure." Andrea lifted the glass award from the pedestal. "And today, it is my privilege and my accountability to present this to you, Camille Brooks, and to say publicly, thank you." A full standing ovation erupted across the auditorium. Camille stepped forward. She accepted the award with both hands, the glass cool against her skin, the room pulsing with applause, light, and something else entirely: change. Andrea extended her hand, and as Camille shook it, the CEO leaned in. "We're ready," Andrea said softly. "Let's build it together." Camille nodded. The 2 women turned back to the audience as the next slide appeared behind them. Announcing the Global Alliance for Fair AI Development, a joint initiative by Lumos Intelligence and Eris Airlines, committed to building algorithmic equity across aviation, finance, healthcare, and education. The applause rose again, thunderous. Camille stepped up to the microphone once more. "We cannot fix what we won't face," she said, her voice now raw with quiet intensity. "But when we do face it, fully, fearlessly, we don't just change code, we change culture." Behind the stage, the media teams went wild. CNN, Reuters, TechCrunch, BBC, all broadcasting the moment live. And somewhere far from that room, Garrett McConnell watched it unfold. Not from a boardroom, but from the sidelines. After months of corporate investigations, leaked NDAs, and public fallout, he had been ousted from Summit Equity. Lawsuits were pending. The video from Flight 572 was now used in training modules across 3 major airlines, labeled under Case Study, Power, Privilege, and Policy Failure. His legacy was a cautionary tale. Camille's, a blueprint. As the summit closed, Camille stood at the edge of the stage, surrounded by journalists, students, and founders from all over the world. One young girl, barely 17, stepped forward. "I applied to the Brooks Foundation last night," she whispered. Camille smiled. "Then I look forward to reading your application." The girl beamed, eyes full of possibility. Camille turned back to the sea of faces, diverse, determined, and wide awake. She'd fought for a seat once. Now, she was building the whole table. And this time, there was room for everyone who'd ever been told, "Not yet, not here, not like that." The story didn't end on that flight. It took off from there.